Clients come to us and they want, especially now in the age of AI, they enter all their facts and they want to know like what their damages are and what their settlement amounts are going to be. And then they come to us with these printouts from AI. Say, look, my robot is telling me this is what I can get. And you have to sort of explain to them, no, that's not how this works.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found, the podcast about the real, messy, unexpected journeys that lead us to the work we love. I'm Monica Argandonia, and every week I talk with someone whose story proves there's no single right way to build a meaningful life. Somewhere around age 21, Chris Davis sat down for a paralegal interview at a law firm and told the partner across the table that he wasn't sure he wanted the job. He wasn't being strategic. He just didn't know yet. She closed the door, and what happened next turned out to be one of those small moments that quietly redirects a life. Today, Chris is the founding partner of Working Solutions Law Firm, an employment law practice with offices in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and a fourth opening in Connecticut. And he represents employees in discrimination cases, wage and hour class actions, and whistleblower claims. As he puts it, the good guys wherever they are. But between that interview and that firm, there was a year of service work in San Francisco on a stipend, a stint in a Senate mailroom, law school at night, and a run as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan. This conversation is part of our AI and Career series, and Chris brought something we haven't heard yet on this show. A lawyer whose firm is running 1,000-client arbitration with AI drafting documents, who will also tell you flatly that nothing is going to sign the pleading for him. We talk about ethical pressures on young associates, the client conversation nobody wants to have, what happens to first-year jobs when the first-year work gets automated, and what he'd say now to the 21-year-old who didn't have an answer. This is Path Found. So, Chris, I'm happy to see you today and talk with you. So we're just going to jump right in, and, I always kind of want a background of my guests, and so I'm going to start when you were 18. What did you think you'd be doing right now when you were 18?
Geez, when I was 18, my goodness, I guess what is that, like senior year of high school, freshman year of college, I really didn't have a fair sense for what I was going to do. I only knew what I had certain interests. I liked to write. I liked music. I liked my English classes. Thought I might be a journalist. I was also interested in certain public service activities, and over time developed more of an interest in community-based organizing and service work, which I did in San Francisco after college. But at the time, like 18, I don't know, I was pretty content to hang out with my friends and not worry too much about the next couple of years. I sort of was like content to like let the world, unfold before me, like and maybe like take every experience as sort of a new thing that I could absorb. I was a young man, and I also feel like I did a lot of like sort of fun things when I was at that age. And, I traveled as much as I could, and I lived on a shoestring. I didn't have a lot of money. And so it was definitely like it was sort of like I would look at, I remember going to an interview. Actually, it's a good story. I was going into my senior year of college, but so I don't know, maybe I was 21, and I went for a paralegal position. I wasn't sure I wanted to go into the field of law, but I was thinking about it. And at that point, I had applied for a volunteer program called the Judgement Volunteer Corps, which was like a great experience. I'm so glad I did it. That was the first thing I did after college. But she asked the partner who was interviewing me, was like, well, why do you want to be a paralegal on a law firm? And I said, I don't know. And she looked at me like that is the wrong answer. But I had no understanding of why I wanted to be a paralegal. And I even said, I'm not even really sure I want the job. It was very funny because I was being brutally honest. And she's like, what else are you looking at? And she kind of laughed. And I told her I wanted to go into the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And she shut the door and she said, I did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And she's like, trust me, you don't want this job. Go do the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which was both really supportive and kind, and also a very good way to like get rid of me as a terrible candidate for a paralegal position that I didn't even really know I wanted. In any event, yeah, it was sort of how things went. Yeah, exactly.
So did you did the volunteer corps?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I did a year of service work in San Francisco. I worked for an organization called the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. I'm not sure if it was both a grassroots organization that did like sentencing advocacy for juvenile criminal justice defendants who were like potentially going to be processed through the adult system. And we would advocate that they be processed through the juvenile system. It was during a time, a very dangerous time in California. It was like during the three strikes period in California, mass incarceration. And I also I did like policy press releases, and like I did a report on incarceration rates among young African American men in California. It was staggering. And there was some impact. We were, the guy who ran it was this guy, Vinny Schiraldi. He actually really was the one who in this era of like, it was just really racist and terrible. I mean, quite honestly, it's like a lot of the language centered on like super predator, African American juvenile delinquents. And there was a lot of bias. I mean, there always has been historically a lot of bias in the criminal defense system. It was sort of like overt, and there was a lot of like this public backlash against, a perceived increase in crime being committed by young inner city youth. This guy Vince Giraldi, like he had a different approach, a more community-based alternatives to incarceration for juvenile defendants. He really emphasized like community reintegration and community programming for juvenile justice defendants instead of like them being locked up for years and years and years and being processed through the adult system. This guy, Vincent Schiraldi, had some success, and he eventually, like in DC, recidivism rates went down. I mean, the bottom line is that ultimately he set out to sort of push back on the culture of mass incarceration back in the 90s. And this was the organization that I was working for. And it was still pretty new, and he was younger. And it was great. I was doing these policy reports and also going into court and representing as a non-lawyer at the sentencing level, like these juvenile justice defendants, for a guy who ended up having a pretty meaningful impact later on down the line. So it was a cool opportunity. I lived in the Mission District in San Francisco at a time when it was just starting to gentrify, but it was still largely like low-income Mexican American immigrants. And I lived on a stipend, and we sort of had a lot of meetings about community, and we followed the sort of social justice principles of the Jesuits. It was a great introduction to adult life. It really, I mean, not that I was the most mature guy in the world, but it helped to set my principles and values, and sort of like it helped me think about the world. Like I got beyond. I was like, wow, I just had a much broader perspective on race, class, and poverty, all those things. I was fortunate. It was a great thing.
Is that when you decided you wanted to be a lawyer?
Yeah, it was that year when I decided I was more invested in taking that. I studied for the LSAT, and also I thought I wanted to become a lawyer and potentially get into some sort of public service law. Then after, as you're aware, after that experience, I came back to Washington, D.C. I worked on Capitol Hill. I did policy work for Senator Feinstein. And I mean, when I say I did policy work, I did not do policy work. I did administrative work. And then I had the lowest position possible, like legislative something correspondent, or what was it? It was like, so I was based back when there were, literally like just answering letters and stuff like that. I worked in the mailroom for a while, went to law school at night, and then I transferred to the day program. And then I went to law school, and I thought, hey, maybe I want to be a trial lawyer or a litigator. And I ended up coming to Manhattan, to New York City. I got a job as a assistant district attorney in Manhattan when I graduated. And I loved that job. And then life happened. Then I had kids, and that whole thing was crazy. And everything sort of shifted and changed. But yeah, so that's chapter one.
So what are you doing right now?
So what ended up happening was, after a few years of, I was married and had young kids, and I decided I needed to go into private practice so I could make some more income and afford to live in New York City and put my kids through college. And so for a few years, I bounced around between different employment law firms. I went into plaintiff side employment law and some management side, but mostly plaintiff side employment law, working on behalf of employees and, in discrimination matters, wage and hour class actions, whistleblower cases, retaliation cases, any breach of contract, anything. It was great work. And over time, I slowly developed a different skill set, which is important. I had to learn how to write, and I needed more money. It was kind of a good way to transition to work that was sort of public interesting, but also and served a good like a common good, but also like afforded me the ability to like make enough money to pay my mortgage and put some money aside for college. In 2000, I decided I kind of wanted to go off on my own, and I started my own law firm. And yeah, I've been doing that ever since. I have my own employment law firm. It's called the Working Solutions Law Firm. We have offices in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and we're opening an office in Connecticut. And right now we have 5 lawyers and, probably about 10 support staff. So it's a small firm. And we do both management, plaintiff and management side cases. As I like to say, we represent the good guys wherever they are. And yeah, we have a lot of really interesting cases now. Right now, we have like a mass arbitration against a large, like gig economy delivery drivers. And we have to do these settlement conference calls, and we've done over 1,000 of them. I've really learned a lot about different areas of the law and how to practice in, different areas of the law.
So what part of the legal work of being a lawyer surprised you the most? Something that they never told you in law school that you just had to learn on the job?
I mean, there is a huge, huge gap between like law school and the practice of law. And when I was going to law school, there weren't a lot of internship opportunity, not as many, but there's more now. But like, I mean, the first thing is that like I took ethics, and I used to think like none of these issues will come up, and like, ethical issues come up literally like every week, like in the practice of law. If you're a litigator, they come up all the time, and you have to sort of have a sense for like right and wrong and where the boundaries are. You have to know where the boundaries are, because oftentimes there's a lot of pressure. Like subtle pressure could be financial pressure, it could be the desire to please a client or something, and you have to be able to say no. And that can be very hard as a young associate. I had to do it a few times. I had a partner ask me to instruct a witness to perjure herself. I mean, literally, it was like, this is just what she said, this is just what we do. I said no. I had to get another partner involved, and it's less dramatic on a day-to-day basis, like, but it does happen that, a lot, that you have to like exercise ethical judgment. I was also just not prepared for some of the realities of the practice of law, which was that law school was competitive, but like finding positions, I got good jobs, but it was like really hard to like land on my feet, especially in private practice, like transitioning to private practice, like, and the almighty billable hour, like working long hours and knowing how to manage your lifestyle and manage yourself when you have these pressures. I mean, the best thing for me has been to be my own boss. I love having my own firm. And like I sort of am able to run the practice the way I want and treat people the way I want. And sometimes I feel like my reaction to like my demeanor as a boss is impacted a lot. It has been impacted a lot by like some of the bad treatment I've received as an associate. Is like to be sort of more human and understanding. At the very least, I still hold people accountable, but to not be a jerk about it. But one thing, like, it's very easy in the practice of law to lose sense, to develop this hyper focus either on money or status or something. I mean, it's surprising how strong that can grip you, and you can lose sense of yourself. At different points, I felt that for me, it was more just like there was a period where I kind of got away from myself, and it was because I felt so much financial pressure to make sure that my family was safe and taken care of financially. And ultimately, like I reached a point where it's like, man, I've got to like reset and take some time out for myself and be more like not just like nose to the grindstone thinking I have to pull in X, Y, and Z. At least when I was in law school, you were like self-management and work-life balance was not something that was like people were aware of back then. It's better now, I think, but the practice of law can be hard like that. You have to learn to set boundaries with other people, with like the profession, with your client. There's a lot of demand, and like people demanding of your time, of your attention, or they want you to do things that you can't do. So learning to set boundaries was a big part of my journey.
So, what's the skill, and do you think that the job actually rewards versus the one people assume it does?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like clients come to us and they want especially now in the age of AI, where they feel like they enter all their facts and they want to know like what their damages are and what their settlement amounts are going to be. And then they come to us with these printouts from AI, say, look, my robot is telling me this is what I can get. And you have to sort of explain to them, no, that's not how this works. But like, people want results, clients want results, and they also have expectations that they come into these. And yeah, some of them, like, their expectations are low, and you have to be like, look, I think we should shoot for more. Some of them, most of the times, they're way high, and they don't take into consideration the fact that any outcome is going to have to be adjusted for risk. And so a lot of my time is spent learning. Like, I have to learn how to communicate with my clients and speak with them in a way that like gets them to appreciate some of the risks on their case.
What is it that makes you a good lawyer that people don't necessarily think about?
I think what they're looking for experience, like sort of a quick mind, like and a depth of understanding, like that you grasp the issues, like not only that you grasp the issues, but that you have a plan and any experience and how to do this. And honestly, people want to know that you have like backbone as a lawyer, that you are going to stand up for them. Clients never appreciate the fact that a big part of the role is to tell them they have a way more risk than they think. And then, no, a lot of times we say, no, you don't even have a case. We can't even represent you. And people are like floored. That happens all the time. And we have to like tell them like, oh, you don't have a case. But sometimes, actually, I had a mediation this past week. I could tell you this anonymously, but like it was a CEO for a large company, and I was represented him. He had a breach of contract claim that seemed pretty straightforward. There was no evidence that he had been a bad employee. They just couldn't afford him. So after they hired him, they realized they couldn't afford him anymore, and then they fired him. And they didn't pay out his severance. And his severance agreement, his employment contract said that he was guaranteed severance if he was fired, not for cause, but if he was fired for cause, he didn't get severance. So they said, you're fired for cause. And it was like, cause is defined as like committing a crime, not some fact dispute over whether or not someone was actually performing their job. So he had a pretty good case, but about halfway through, it turns out he had like downloaded a whole bunch of documents that he shouldn't have downloaded, like proprietary data that he could give to a competitor. He didn't actually give it to a competitor. But about halfway through the mediation, I had to pull the mediator in and speak to this client and tell him like, hey, you're just telling me now about this. If they find out about it, it's going to impact your case. So we have to be a little more practical. And I told the mediators, like, come in and let's just talk about this. And I didn't know exactly what the mediator was going to say, but I knew the mediator had heard this a million times before, because it happens a lot in these cases where all of a sudden you have a client who's like, oh, I removed a few things, or I still have a laptop or a device with all this data. So then I didn't really know what the mediator was going to say. The mediator said, like, look, the fact that you kept these documents, even if you didn't distribute them, that's going to be a problem. And then my client said, well, all right, it's going to be a problem, but they don't know about it. And my response initially was like, well, they're going to find out. But then the mediator who had been speaking with them was like, they know about it. Like, they already knew about it. And he just had been told not to tell us. And I think, now that the cat was out of the bag, he let us know. And it was at that point my client's eyes went like this, but I had to break it down for him. So the expectation is that as a lawyer, like there's certain things I can't overcome. We got a great outcome, all things considered. He got a result that was well into the six figures, and he's happy. But he was able to accept the fact. There was a situation where it was like he could accept the fact that he had risk on his case, because it was kind of dramatic the way it unfolded, which helped. But there's a lot of instances with people who just can't wrap their heads. A lot of clients who were like, look, this is what the case is worth, and this is what I should be getting. And they don't see the risk. It's true for a lot of people, but you got to like kind of break it down for them. Yeah.
So you brought up AI, so I'm going to pivot to that. When did it start showing up in your practice?
About 2 years ago, and when it first showed up, my kids sort of talked about chat, and some younger clerks started using chat and stuff that's a big no-no. At first, like, nobody was using it. There was concerns initially the concerns were weird. I mean, they were legitimate, but it was like the AI results were not reliable. I mean, that's true. They're not entirely, but it's like human results are not reliable. You just have to, there was all this noise about like, all right, there's going to be like hallucinations and, AI is going to be citing cases that don't exist. And, we're all going to be chasing our tails with this AI thing and giving our clients bad advice. And so there was a lot of restrictions at law firms on use of AI. I mean, I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, but it seemed like something that just teenagers were using. And my really big issue is confidentiality, is that we can't have like our clerks and our interns and like stuffing all this data into their personal chat GPT accounts they're going to end up back in, or like educating the chat GPT brain.
When do you actually start using it?
This year we started using it. Like I got an enterprise account like a year and a half ago. I didn't really use it until it's been this year that we started using it a lot more. And in particular on like I now have a mass arbitration. Basically my AI is performing the functions of a lawyer right now. Like it will every week it adjusts a series of like smart sheets based on other like certain like how many calls we've done. It updates everything like all of my smart sheets to make sure that we didn't miss like attributing a phone call to a certain person. It updates address information based on emails coming in. I mean, the most amazing thing is that it's now drafting like simple documents. It'll draft statements of claim. Like these are all arbitrations that are going to be filed in different states, and it drafts those statements of claim and it uploads them to our document database, and then we go in and proof them and send them out via DocuSign for signature. So, I mean, that's been incredible. Like, we have over 1,000 clients right now, and the efficiencies have been unbelievable.
The counting and the time and doing all of that. I mean, that's got to be huge, and those aren't necessarily tasks that anybody would miss, right?
Like even like 2 years ago, this automation was kind of clunky. We'd have to draft all these templates, and then we could maybe have like map certain data into the templates by state, but like 100 at a time, and it would take a lot. It would take a lot of time. But now AI creates the templates and then pulls the data from the sheets and then drafts the statement of claim without any of us having to coordinate anything. And then it uploads it to our document database so that my assistant, can go in and proof it and then get it out by DocuSign. So it's, and it helps. It reviews my email and it drafts emails to opposing counsel. I mean, on this case in particular, it's extremely useful. And as like cases are like, I found that like I'm now creating projects for it. Like I'll create a project we use Perplexity, which is like, it's a multi-model browser. So it basically, all of its searches run through Claude and Chat. I mean, people tend to be, happy with Claude. We have been, but like Perplexity it's very good for professionals, and it has like a deep research function that's useful, and it's good for like case citations. It's also helping us. It's helping us with like simpler drafting, and we're adding a bunch of templates now so that it can template and draft things easier for pretty much any type of case that we might have. So it's making things easier. Everything, like it replaces a lot of the functions of like the first year associate. Everything needs to be checked, and time consuming part is also just the scripts, like making sure that you build like different pieces of the automation correctly so it doesn't screw up, and that your templates are solid. Sometimes you got to go back in, and sometimes links break and stuff. You got to go back in and fix stuff. But yeah, now a component of legal work now is just supervising your AI and checking the product. And that's the most important thing.
So you just said it kind of replaces what a first year associate would be doing. But if that's gone and that, that keeps happening, how does a first year associate ever get trained?
We actually have a first year associates to actually supervise the AI and also to use AI effectively. Like, I'm spending a lot of my time as a partner now banging around with AI, but really we want our associates to like be adept at using it as well. And nothing's going to replace, like someone needs to exercise human judgment and like settle cases, go to trial, do depositions, stuff like that. So we're always going to need lawyers, but there's areas of the practice of law that are going to be, it's made us more efficient in certain cases, but it also kind of has this way of like creating more work too, because there's a different type of work that you have to be, like your capacity expands, but you also have to attend to all the component pieces of like the functions that you built through AI, the scripts, really. Like you build these scripts and it's running automation and checking your emails, checking your data, checking your documents, but like you have to make sure that it's doing it correctly and you have to adjust the scripts. So in every couple of weeks, there's something new like that needs to change on a case. So it's like sitting down with a meeting with an associate every week or 2 weeks, and it takes time. Whereas you could just have the associate sort of take over the work of the AI, of supervising the AI and managing some of these bigger projects. So either way, there's going to be work available for young lawyers, and nothing will really replace the individual judgment and decision making that lawyers have to. I mean, AI can assist and probably, and still, I'm not a believer that like AI's judgment is poor. AI, people resist AI because we don't want to be obsolete. And the truth is that there's a lot of research that suggests that AI actually makes good decisions, possibly better than ours. But I've found that what really matters is actually the integration or the relationship between AI and the user. And you have to be able to like educate AI so that it's effective. And if you don't do that effectively, it can make mistakes, and it's not as there's like skills that you have to learn as a lawyer for like how to actually manage the AI. That's a big thing.
So it's almost like new roles that are going to come up inside your firm or anywhere that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned confidentiality. How do you deal with that and AI?
We have a strict policy that anyone who uses AI, I mean, there's limited access to AI, but anyone who uses AI has to use our enterprise account. And with enterprise accounts, like all of the data and documents that you upload, they are walled off from the main algorithms of like the AI search engines and brains. And so, and our data and documents that we upload to like educate or, for searches and for tasks, it stays within our enterprise universe, and it's not. And we also have like note-taking software, like we turn on for like Teams calls and stuff, so that it transcribes the calls, and we do use it quite a bit. But we make sure that all of the notes and the data that we collect, that all of that stays in-house, and that it is not distributed outside of our law firm. The big thing is like, is this data being used to like train the AI, which is potentially a breach of confidentiality? And we have invested in software and bought licenses that protect against that. Like just human error is really the biggest, or just like we've had a couple of calls where the AI note taking has been on under circumstances where it shouldn't be on, and we've had to fumble around and turn it off. Or, there's always this concern that it's accidentally going to email, our notes from a session to the wrong person, opponent, or something like that. But I mean, we have protections in place. We have a lot of like deletion policies, purging, to make sure that, there's not just like AI data, like AI recorded data and like the information, AI recorded data of like conversations with clients or confidential or documents or something, like any session that may have that data in it is time limited, or protected by like some sort of barrier.
So if someone is interested in pursuing law, or they're even starting law school, say this fall, what should they prepare for?
I think if you're entering law school now, like things are going to be changing very quickly on the ground, like the practice of laws. And it's definitely, people are saying it's harder to find jobs as lawyers. But I think you have to just be persistent and wait for this AI thing to shake out a little bit, because I think the roles are changing, and, the way in which we work with AI changing. I think if you're going to law school, I don't know that law schools are really, some of them, the profession is slow to embrace AI, but there are those people out there who have, and it's turning a little bit, but to take classes, or even just like continuing education classes or legal education classes or something, and learn the like good skills for how to use AI. And take ethics classes on it. Like, what are the limitations of AI? Like, what the ethical limitations, like confidentiality and diligence is a big issue. You can't just push a button and let AI draft something. I mean, there's a lot of stories about like AI punching out inaccurate stuff, but you want to push a button and have AI draft something, but you've got to put eyes on it. And ultimately, as a lawyer, you're signing the pleading and affirming to the court and to your own client that you've been diligent in your legal representation, and the representations in whatever you're signing are accurate. So you can't do that. You don't even have the ability to sign that thing if you haven't looked at it. It's like you can't attest to the things that you need to attest to in order to like satisfy your ethical obligations.
Law firms, what you're saying, and it's going to keep getting better. There is going to be less lawyers, a need for less lawyers, right? Because you would be able to do the same amount of work with a smaller staff. Yes, of course, you still need people to review and do all those things, but and especially if you also look at paralegals or legal assistants, do you actually see firms shrinking in size?
I don't know if I see firms shrinking. I don't think they're growing. And I know that once AI hit, yes, we used to have at different points, I've had lawyers, and we've been able, like, I've had long periods of time where we had two full-time associates, and now we have two part-time associates. And yeah, I mean, look, the practice of law is changing, but it's also evolving. I saw some statistics on which professions are going to be impacted the most by AI. And healthcare is like the least. Healthcare professionals like nursing, stuff like that, because there's so much that involves certain skills that AI is not good at. The legal profession is like in the middle. Like there's certain functions that AI will be able to handle and certain functions it won't be able to handle. AI is not going to be able to handle the more like intuitive, creative aspects, or even the ethical judgment. You can get advice, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a lawyer that's like a flesh and bone lawyer that's making these decisions and protecting the client's confidentiality. And it's increased our capacity in certain ways. Like we're able to handle these like large arbitrations that are document heavy. But I'm not, we were thinking, we don't, at one point we're like, I don't even know if we're going to need associates, but we do. Like it's not necessarily the case that associates and paralegals are going to be gone. They're not gonna, not for the like. And as AI expands and people's capacity for using AI expands, it's not like they're going to be like, oh, I'm good. It's like you need someone else to help you figure out the AI, like, and to draft all the scripts. This summer, I had a lot of law clerks here or undergraduate students, and they did all our AI templates. And at some point, I have to run one of those templates, have a draft a motion, but I've got to like upload it, format it, like all this stuff I need to do. And I'll probably just give it to my associate.
So then I think this goes back to that question that I asked earlier about, what's the skill that this job actually rewards or that actually needs? And it's going to be the skill that can't replace.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's true.
Which would be what?
I mean, there's a few different things, like client communication, that's huge. I mean, persuasion too, rhetoric, like being able to persuade people, that's not AI's thing. Like those conversations I was talking about before about telling clients that they don't have a case, like dealing with an angry client, unreasonable expectations, like, or even like taking a deposition, making an argument to a jury, like learning how to establish trust and exercising professional judgment. I don't, and even like just like making adjustments on the fly and proofing documents and pulling together in real time like a data. It's still, you need someone on the ground to like finalize all of that stuff. It makes the earlier steps, like it makes that much easier. Yeah, but there's still this like a lot of judgment and polishing and finalizing documents, like the ultimate, like the things that you think of matter the most, like persuasion, judgment, establishing trust, communication, client relationships, those type of things, like still very much needed. Yeah.
Looking back now, knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell your 21-year-old self? What advice would you give your young self?
That's a good question. I don't have regrets in life. Like, I think there are periods where, like early on as a young professional, where I felt a little insecure, and it was hard for me to grow up and sort of accept all of this responsibility. but it resulted in me just there was a few years where I was like very focused on my career. And, I think it had an impact on some of my relationships. And it took a little while and some of my habits, and it took a little while to like straighten that out. And I think in particular, like friendships and relationships outside of work have become much more important to me, like much more important. My relationships with my kids, my now ex-wife, marriage didn't survive. That gives you some sense for what I would tell the 21-year-old. I have a very good divorce, but like and I have good relationship with my kids, but I would probably tell them like tell myself to wear life like a loose garment a little bit, and to appreciate friendships and relationships more. I mean, gradually over time, I've sort of lost that youthful insecurity, and I focus on people and relationships more. I'm more present, and I think to be more present and not so driven. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate this conversation.
Of course, it's been my pleasure, Monica.
Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.